everyone to mute yourselves if you would, except for, oh, I'm going to make Sarah the co-host so you don't have to mute yourself.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And so let me just take a moment to introduce Sarah. Sarah and I met, I want to say 2017, was it? In Colorado.
2019, actually.
Was it? Oh,
Yeah.
but I've known you before that.
You knew me about 2018, maybe I did.
Yes.
The Network course,
Yes.
that's right.
Right. But Sarah and I serve on the Evolutionary Leaders Council, which is very special to me because I get to connect with people like Sarah, who are paradigm changers and visionaries. And I've done a lot of work over the years with my relationship with money, which we will get into as a discussion. And honestly, as soon as I started on Sarah's course with the Shift Network, there was something completely different about the energy and the authenticity and the integrity with which this message that Sarah is the conduit for came through. And at that time, I had only gotten through half of the course, and Sarah's included these, what she calls transformances, which have an underlying music to it that has been developed by a dear friend of both of us. So the alignment, everything is just in such beautiful attunement and alignment. And I know when you buy the book, here's my commercial, got the book, get the book, that you will also be able to tap into some of those transformance meditations, which I will get Sarah to speak more about. But I think what I would love is for Sarah to bring us into a money grounding. And then I'd love for you, Sarah, to talk about how this all came about for you. This whole relationship with money and the book launch, if you were on it on Tuesday, was fabulous. So I'm just really grateful to be able to have this time with you and the others on the call today. So please, Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Laurie. It's really nice to be here and to explore this topic in a different energy field. In my language, I talk a lot about energy. So let's start by really connecting with the field that sits around this work, that is combining between Laurie and all of you in Laurie's community and the message that I share, which is around money. Let's close our eyes for a few minutes so that we can feel the presence of this field of energy that has brought us together today, that brings together the message of grace and money and business and evolution and a rich, fulfilling life. Let's ground our energy. So this isn't something out there in our imagination or in our vague hopes, but something we can experience here, now. And when we choose. Let's feel the connection with Earth as our place. with our bodies and our environments, which are the way that we express this energy. Let's feel the connection with our communities, the people with whom we share the energy of money, the energy of generosity and abundance. And let's connect with our inner selves, that place that feels like this is me. This is my true self. This is who I really am. Very simple, present, alive, special and ordinary at the same time. And let's open ourselves to whatever is going to emerge during this time that we're spending together. That each one of us may receive something that is profoundly beneficial to our lives and the lives that we touch. And since Laurie mentioned those transformances, these recordings, I'd actually really love to play a very short one here. Laurie, in fact, you made somebody else co-host.
I made you the co-host.
Somebody else's name came up. Maybe then it doesn't work.
Oh,
I can't
sorry. No,
screen
wait.
share.
I will make it happen. All right. I must have.
Sometimes it clicks somebody else's name in.
Yeah.
That's me now. Yeah,
That's
let's see.
what happened.
Yeah, that's working now. So just keep your eyes closed and listen.
Listen. Listen to the sound of your own heart. To the sound of your inner presence. Listen. Come into yourself and listen deeply. Where are you now? Listen to yourself. Can you hear? Can you hear that small voice? hear the sweetness of your own soul as it sings its music. Playing through your heart and through all your being. This is you. This is you meeting you. So listen. This is you.
Thank you. So you might wonder why soul and why, in Laurie's conversation about grace, we're talking about money and how those two things go together. So I'll just explain to you how that came about, because it really creates an understanding of this rather different approach to money. When it was about December 2011, no, 2010, coming off the back of the recession that happened in 2008, when the banking system crashed and my business crashed basically at the same time in London. So it was an extremely difficult time for me. I had no money, couldn't afford the rent on the apartment that I was living in at the time in London. And I had nothing to do. I was used to working 7 days a week, typical business owner type of thing. And one day I literally found myself writing messages from money. Actually, because I did my book relaunch the other day, it was a little notebook like this. This is some of the original book. I was just journaling, and I wrote this extraordinarily beautiful message from money. And it said, the first thing it said to me was, I would like to tell you to love me. And then it went on and it said, I'm an energy, I'm incredibly beautiful and powerful. I'm here to help human beings. I connect you together in your creativity. And it ended by saying, don't wait, just take me. I will love you. And it was so different from anything that I had ever heard or felt about money. It opened my heart instantly. And it wasn't my language. It was clearly not something that I knew. It was clearly somehow money, this energy of money speaking through my pen. And so because it was such a beautiful experience, I went on and wrote every day for a few months. And at a certain point, I thought, oh, this is probably supposed to be a book. I was just writing it for me to begin with. And I turned it into a book and I called it Love Money, Money Loves You. And that's the book that was relaunched earlier this week and fundamentally changes our understanding of what money is. It is an energy that is beautiful, that is generous, that is love. It's an expression of love. And therefore, it's an energy to embrace into our world, not to be afraid of or to experience stress around or inner conflict. And I then had to go and learn how to do it, because after writing the book, I was still broke. But after applying what's in the book, I learned how to do money a different way. And I'm still learning every single day. I'm now engaged in building a huge business, like potentially huge business, that enables us to bring this kind of system in, rather than the system we have at the moment that is so open to corruption and is also based on valuing the wrong things. So we're trying to shift what we value now, so that we value things like living soil rather than dead soil, living trees rather than dead trees, biodiversity, healthy human beings, healthy ecosystems, all of that. We have to shift our value system to be able to do that. So from that moment of being completely broke writing the book, I now find myself in a very different position, thinking about much bigger things. And in the meantime, I've been teaching people all the way through how to do this and how it works.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I know the thing that struck me so much was the notion of a relationship with money. And I had, we've all been around the block a few times over the last 20 years with all of the materials out there about attracting money and abundance and all of that. And I think we're at a critical point when we think about these quote unquote law of attraction tenets that sometimes can be unsubstantial. In other words, we get the sound bite, but we don't understand what the real message is underneath that. I know myself, it's really about, it is not A leads to B leads to C. It is not, I want the BMW, whatever, I want this much in my account. It's not about that. It's about what you're bringing to the table, which is helping us understand that, like, I got to clear out, what are my relationship blocks with money? What are my transgenerational issues with money? What have been my patterns through life? And so maybe just to address I guess what I'm asking you is to tell us the difference between what you are inviting people to do versus what some of the more, what is the word I'm looking for, kind of quick.
The quick fix.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
The promise of instant riches. And there are some extraordinary stories in the law of attraction movement. And there's a truth behind those stories. Mm-hmm. And I think that's made it harder, because many people have come away frustrated because they don't know how to make it work. And they also don't understand that there's so much. I think what's important actually to recognize, and really came through when I was writing the book, is that money as a system, the energy of money system that sits behind our notes and coins and transactions, what we think of as money, is also evolving. And so I think there was a time when that personal, I want this, I want a BMW, or I want a big house, or whatever it was, it kind of worked better. I think that might have been a phase of evolution. It didn't work for everybody, and there are reasons why it doesn't work for everybody, but I think it worked better then. And what I am experiencing is that we are now evolving, which we can see very clearly. And that's what my book said. There's a beautiful passage in it where it says, dream the biggest change that you can imagine for society, which is really an act of generosity. What would I love to see in the world? And then it encourages you to create this energy of enjoyment around that change, which then feeds into an enjoyable or even potentially joyful contribution to that change, which obviously links with your sense of purpose in the world, and then bringing money into that. Now, that's very different from the I want the BMW, but it doesn't exclude it. It doesn't mean, oh, you have to be unbelievably virtuous and poor all over again and completely focus on, we've had some very old notions, especially in activism, where you do the right thing and you exclude money, or money's bad and is going to hurt it. And it actually, I think, makes it much harder for people to be effective activists because they don't have the resources they need to be able to do what they want to achieve. So what I really feel is that we are changing our relationship with money, which is very good news because it allows us to align money with purpose, which is richly and deeply fulfilling. The other thing that comes through for me time and time again, and is included in the title that you gave to this event, Laurie, is this notion of a rich life, not of being a rich person, like having a rich bank account, but having a rich life. And if there's a certain level of comfort in your home that enables you to have a rich life, or if there's a car, like I really like to drive a car that is quiet and comfortable. I just don't like really noisy cars. Some people, my brother-in-law has a very noisy BMW and absolutely loves it. To me, the minute he puts that noise thing on, it's like, oh, stop, please. So whatever it is for you, like, money encourages us to enjoy it and to use it, just take it and use it. But I think that when we have this alignment with the heart and with a sense of purpose, we then use it beautifully, and we don't have that need to either prove ourselves by some kind of unnecessary accumulation. And there's nothing wrong with accumulation, there's nothing wrong with wealth, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But what's not great is to be incredibly wealthy and feel completely hollow inside. And what's not great is to feel completely purposeful and totally broke and unable to reach many people because you don't have access to any funds. So
I can speak to that.
Oh, can you?
And so for the people on the call who know the grace process formula, and Sarah's somewhat familiar with it, it's about choice. What is our intention? And in this case, what is our intention around money? And then look at our judgments and look at the forgiveness that might be needed about from ourselves, other people, circumstances, and even the divine about money. And then to unblock those methods of receiving, which come from being in gratitude, love, joy, and wonder. That yes, it's the richness is not about what's in your bank account. It's about how you feel in your heart every day, and in your like, what do I want to do with money? And I'll tell a few things, but one was I was on a workshop with Sarah, I don't know, maybe in our friend Jeff Vanderkloot, a few years ago. And in the middle of that workshop, I was like, I had this major aha. Like I had a little extra money at that time after many years. And I went, oh my gosh, I can spend money on pleasure. It was a total, I had grown up in poverty mentality in a Irish Catholic family of 7. And, and the book Angela's Ashes were my predecessors, my grandparents. And money was like, you never gave anybody any money because you didn't have any money. And it was all this tension around it. I thought I grew up in middle class. And then I realized, oh, I was actually lower class economically. We just didn't know it, which is fine. But I had to do a lot to shift my relationship with money. And then I'll just bookmark that for a second, because I thought when I reached my mature ages that I would have enough money to do nonprofit work, to do humanitarian work in the world. And I thought I should have X amount of dollars in my bank account. Went through a divorce, a near-death experience, and then went into a lot of fear about my future. And really taking responsibility for my relationship with money has changed everything, because I had a pattern: men, money, betrayal. We don't have to go into all of that, but just, inviting other people to look at that. And then also my own sense of, I was selfish about money. I was hoarding it. I have a buck in every pocket. I have money stashed in locations that I can't even find anymore, because I had this scarcity thing. Then I get invited to go to Rwanda, and I'm just, post-divorce, not quite stable on my feet yet. And I want to go there for 5 weeks, but it requires paying my mortgage and paying a lot of money for all the things we have to do on the ground in Rwanda. But I knew it was my calling. I knew, I was so excited, but I felt really depressed because I couldn't afford it. And then someone said to me, why don't you ask people for money? The shame that came with that, it almost took me to my knees. We can tell, and I don't want to make this about me, but I'm just saying, chronicling some of my inputs into this. I had somebody hypnotize me about money. I did all my EFT work around releasing, asking for money. And then I came to this deep insight in meditation that there were a lot of people who wanted to join me on this adventure, but knew they couldn't, and wanted to give me money because they trusted me to go do this thing. And then I realized, oh my gosh, money is just the vehicle of people's love and support. So that, and then it rained miracles for 100 days. $5 from a kindergarten class, $1,000 from somebody I don't even know, many people on the call donating $25, $50 and more. And I began to realize that this was so important for me to honor, that these were gifts of love that allowed me to do what I wanted to do in the world, so that abundance now is simply an exchange of energy, money being one form. Now, fundraising has been fun, but it continues to be a challenge. But what I realized from reading your book and doing the transformances was that I wanted to be as intimate in my relationship with money as I was in all the other important relationships in my life. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that. I know I mentioned a bunch of things, but we've got transgenerational trauma. We've got my own trauma. There's a lot of trauma around money.
Well, I'm going to start with where you ended, because I think this is a really useful lens to be able to look at your own relationship with money. If you think about it literally as a relationship and use relationship language, and you have this relationship with an energy that is invisible to us, because the relationship really isn't with the notes and the coins on the whole. I know there are people who teach you to kiss your wallet and stuff like that, but I don't think that really gets to the point. But if you feel that there's this intangible, you can conceive of it how you like. Some people see it as like a being, literally, or a whole. I see it more like a huge kind of bureaucracy of beings, like an organization, literally, that exists to serve the human process of wishing for things and then fulfilling those wishes. But however you see it, just look at the quality of your relationship with it. And so is it a relationship that feels really warm and loving? You know, we tend to want to have relationships that feel warm and loving and generous and joyful, maybe, where we experience a kind of freedom in ourselves. Most people don't have relationships like that very much. But that's we know what we want. Is it like that? Is it like, or somebody described their relationship with money to me like they were the neighbor that they'd never invited to dinner, and the fence was covered in brambles. No, the gate between the properties was covered in brambles. So is it that, or is it sometimes we have literally? I find a lot of people actually really hate money. It's a very strong word, but honestly, if we really look at it, if you behaved to another person the way you behave towards money, would you be able to have a long-term rewarding relationship with that person? And if not, then we can start to unpack what's going on. And I find it really useful also to think about a relationship with a young child, and think about like, how would you treat a young child? So let's say you've got a young child who's afraid, maybe a bit stressed, feels like, oh, I don't really know how to handle this thing called life. You're not going to be really punishing and unkind to the child. You need to be very kind. So in your relationship with money, it's also important to be really kind to yourself, not only to the other person, but also to yourself, because you will find many areas where you are hard, judgmental, critical. These are the things that we mostly find in ourselves, and that really doesn't help. So I had to literally train myself to see myself like a really small child, where I wouldn't dream of being harsh or critical, because that child just doesn't know any better. In your relationship with money, wherever it is now, you don't know any better. You really are basing it on what you've learned. It can become better, but it will not become better by harshness. And I think a lot of what happened with the law of attraction stuff is that people got really hard on themselves when it didn't work and beat themselves up. And then that's a very difficult cycle. If you start with the kindness, it's then easier to look at the traumatized aspects, because there is often trauma in families, or maybe in your own life. There have been betrayals and people cheating and lying, or behaving appallingly around money, and that's very, very disturbing to the psyche, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And not to see trauma under every rock, but since I am the trauma healing person,
Yeah.
I think it is important for people to look at their traumas around money, the things that have made us feel, I mean, not only as a humanitarian person, but as a a counselor. We're not supposed to make money. You're not supposed to profit from being of service. That's that's just a whole crazy thing that's gone on, number one. But it's so important for people. I'm inviting people right now to just think about, what have been those trauma points for you. And when I think about my efforts to earn enough money to go to college as the first person in my family, and when I think about all the different things that had to be done to achieve that, to the point of not treating myself well, not doing well with self-care, because I had to make that money because I was driven. And then that sense of, like, you right now on this verge of a whole new vision, changing a paradigm of how we feel about our relationship with whatever it is. Then I don't know about you, but then there's a little contraction again. It's like, oh, I thought I was here with it, and now I want to reach 1 million people. And then what happens? Does that make any sense in terms of navigating?
Yes. Because look, I started from when I really started to apply the book, which was about a couple of years after I wrote it, and I moved to Australia with my husband, and we had just enough money to put a bond on a rental house to get the cheapest car that we could get. I then had $1,000 left, from which I had to buy chairs so that I could have clients, a fridge, a washing machine, and we'd bought a, like a really thin foam mattress that we could sleep on. It was that tight. And then a point came where I realized I have to be earning money in the next 2 weeks in order to be able to stay here. And we didn't know a single person in Australia at that time, literally. So we started from nothing. And where I am now is that through my other business, not my teaching business, but my other business, I'm now in a process of actually selling an asset. It's not a personal asset. It's a business asset that's worth very nearly $1 billion. So I've had to go from somebody who was literally where $20 was all I could expect to have in my bank account. I felt I could rely on $20, but I really couldn't rely on any more than that. And a lot of magic had to be done at times to get the rent together and stuff. To being able to speak this language with multiple zeros. And what I've experienced through that is a series of steps in a way, and changes in me. Every single one of them, I go through a period of feeling really daunted by the next stage. And I've experienced that earlier this year, especially with that business, the numbers being so huge. It's like not many of us get to speak about numbers that size in a way that is actually related to what we're doing. We hear it on the news, but to actually have to relate to that yourself, and feel that that's right. Questions come up, the cycles come up around, whatever your issue is. It's not a worthiness thing for me exactly. I don't think I think a lot about worthiness, but there's for me it's more a kind of denial. It's like I want to deal with this because this is what I do, but I just want to pretend it's not there. And that's what I did all through my life with money. It's just like, okay, I'm going to do business, but I'm going to pretend money's not there. It's like, I just don't want to, it's like I'm going to have a husband, but I'm going to pretend I don't, and I'm going to pretend that sex doesn't exist. And I'm just going to go into denial around the whole thing. That's kind of, I think, my pattern. And so I have to face it at a deeper level, and at a more expanded level each time. And it's not as hard because at first I couldn't see it at all. I had no idea. I just thought I was normal. Now I will start to have uncomfortable feelings. It's like, oh, okay, I know that this is good. I know that this means that things are opening up. I know that there's a step going on here. I know I'm going to be all right as well, but I still have to go through it. And it can be months of feeling just like, it's like, what's happening? I don't feel comfortable. There's this feeling of growing, really. So yes, Laurie, absolutely. I would say that's the case. And I think that that's totally natural. I don't think that there's some version of life where I should just be able to move from here to there without there being any sense of change. I feel like, I think we look for that. It's like, oh yeah, I want the $10 million house, but I don't want to have to change anything. I'm not going to create a business that's going to get me that $10 million house. I'm not going to do anything for it. I just want it to sort of magically appear because I'm sort of magically able to. The more you want, what I found is the more I want, which is really in many ways what I want for the world and for me, the more I have to show up, the more responsibility I have to take, the more problems I have to solve, the more challenges I have to take on, and the more willing I need to be to do that without destroying myself. So I actually need to learn new ways all the time of managing my own life, because I can't do 10 or a billion times as much work as I did 8 years ago, because I'm talking about larger numbers. And all of that, there's so many weird little thoughts that happen in our minds in that process.
I'm so glad that you touched into your own personal process there, because I know the people on this call and the people who will listen to it are committed to their inner growth. And it's our relationship with money is no different from our relationship with anything else. And yet we would be surprised and shocked, perhaps, to, as you said, the weird thoughts, that come up. And so it's I talk a lot about form versus function. And so we often think the form of the BMW or the $10 million house or whatever, but it's really, what is the function of what I'm asking for? What is the function? I just want a third room in my house so I can have guests. I just want a comfortability for my clients to come here. I learned very quickly I'd rather have friends who have the $10 million house, because I don't want to take care of the $10 million house. So
there's a bit of a problem there, isn't there?
I love people with boats because I want to walk on and walk off. But I will say that when I really get quiet with myself, no matter how many times I've been nervous about money, and being on a humanitarian path almost requires that, never knowing what's going to happen next year, I have always been provided for. And when I understand that, that's abundance. And it's this person may have the form of the dollars and the coins and the paper, and then they transfer it to me so that I create the form of, loving and doing trauma healing in the world. But speak a little bit about those nuances of relationships with money, as you just talked about, as you're expanding into a whole new view and vision. You have to have courage. You have to have trust. I try to teach people how to trust themselves, their higher selves, their divine selves. Same is true of money. How have you changed your relationship with money to trust yourself now in a way that maybe didn't happen in 2008?
I the way that I've changed that is by experiencing it working. I think it's really hard. Like, there are times when you just have to trust because you have no option. And we have those experiences in life. I haven't had the drama in hospital type of experience, but I had a lot of small experiences, and this is really how I built my trust. I remember several experiences traveling and realizing I was in a foreign country, and whatever my money system was at the time was not adequate to get me to the next step. I remember standing on Zagreb station, and my credit card had failed that morning in a bank in Bosnia, and it failed again, and I had a flight that had already been booked to catch from Italy tomorrow morning, and I only had like $200 on my card anyway. So it was literally my last bit of money that I had access to, and the card didn't work, and the train was going to go in half an hour. And my husband and I looked at each other and smiled. We just smiled and smiled and smiled, and the guy tried again and it didn't work. And we smiled and smiled and smiled, and we said, try again, and it worked. There are lots and lots of examples like that. Times when I couldn't pay the rent. I remember sitting and literally couldn't pay the rent. I needed $300, and we were trying to sell a fridge. We'd bought a fridge that was too noisy. Like, these are silly stories, but this is how you build trust. Yeah. And I didn't know what to do, but I needed $300. I sat and meditated my way into feeling amazing. That's all I remember. I just was going to sit there until I felt amazing. And during it, this guy called and said, I want to buy your fridge. I'm bringing cash. Is that okay? Normally people don't even mention that they've got cash. It's like, I want to look at it, and I want to bargain with you, and I wanted this and I wanted that. He didn't do any of that. He just walked in, paid the cash, took the fridge, done, same day. So that's how I built trust. And I had many times in the early days when I would fight with myself. I'd say, look, the book says you can do it. And it's like, no, I don't believe it. Yeah, but come on, that's what it says. Yeah, but what if it's not true? And I would literally argue with myself. And the thing that worked for me, and I think this is really useful in the development of trust, is that I always won those battles by saying, I want to believe what's in the book because it's a better version of the world. I want the world to be like my book says. And every time I did that, I got a result straight away. Mm-hmm. Every time I went with what my head says was rational, just keep fighting. So through the years, and then having to get bigger results. I remember when I first needed to get about $8,000, and I was just off the back of, scraping my rent together, but got it. And then you get bigger ones, and then you get bigger ones. And that's how you build trust, I think, because you realize that when you really radically open to life solution rather than your own mental solution, life either gives you the solution or it gives you something better that you'd never imagined. And that's what helped me to realize that life is actually on my side. And so I tend to think more about trusting life. I don't necessarily trust other people, because you can't always trust other people. I don't necessarily trust myself because I'm not 100% reliable. I have some bad habits. I have some things that I let people down in. I try not to, but I still do. And I have areas where I know that I'm weak, I'm learning. So I try to keep an eye on that and not trust myself. It's like I try to trust life to take care of me and to show me when I'm messing up and to show me when I need to adjust something. And that's just grown through experience.
Beautiful. And I'm so glad you touched into, because that is a big part of the grace process formula, which is gratitude that gives rise to love, that gives rise to joy, that gives rise to wonder. And when we are in those states, we can literally go back to our judgments and the forgiveness that's needed, and it can easily drop away when we are in that huge appreciation, the abundance mode of appreciating everything. And it's trust is a relationship. Life, being in life and with life is a relationship. And I'm always surprised. I kind of do these little, I play games with myself about money. Like I said, about having $1 in every pocket or whatever, but I actually forget. I knew that my relationship with money was getting better when I forgot about a CD I had over here, or I forgot about this little cache of money I had over here. It's like, oh my gosh, I have kidded myself so much about it.
I have this memory, and I don't know if it was you, but I keep thinking it was you. If it wasn't you, it was somebody else in that workshop that we did, and I may have got the wrong one, remembering an account that had a lot of money in it.
Yes.
Wasn't that you, Laurie?
Yes.
I mean, that was a lot of money.
Yes. So what I had done, and again, this is so funny, because with the humanitarian work, I always felt like I never knew where the next $25 was coming from, or I never knew. I was always pushing the envelope. And so I forgot that I had this lovely donor. I think it was $10,000. And I remember saying, I'm going to put this in a separate interest-bearing account, because I want that to be available for if there's an issue. Completely forgot about it. And in the workshop that you're talking about, I set my intention in the workshop. I forget what my intention was. Oh, I said I had a humanitarian project I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure how I was going to get there. And then after we did the work on the workshop, I said, oh my gosh, I just remembered I have this money over here. So please speak to that in terms of, I mean, I can speak to it in myself, but the things that we do to make it difficult to have a relationship with money, to whatever.
Well, the thing that seems to be actually the case always, and not always easy to see, is that what you need for your next step is always here. It's always right in front of you. Sometimes when we think of the huge result, we only think of the huge result, but actually that huge result you get to by lots and lots of little things. And what I find is a habit amongst us is to think, oh, I need this thing. In order to be able to do this, I need that. In order to be able to do this, I need this X much money. And then it feels big and difficult and we can't do it. But actually, the next step is always right here. And it's already there, or the money is already there. And it's so common for people to have experiences like that, where the money that they're looking for, and they come along and saying, oh, Sarah, I really need this money. It's actually already there, either literally forgotten, or there's somebody who's offering them something and they're saying, oh, no, I couldn't possibly take that for some reason. Or that actually it's not money they need at all at the moment. They need something, they need some help, and that help's already been offered to them. It's amazing how that happens. So I feel that a lot of the work that we need to do is really cleaning up our own energy so we can see clearly first of all, see clearly what's for me to do and what's not for me to do, because we do an awful lot of stuff that's a complete waste of time. And then see clearly what the next step is and where it is, see what's around us and what's being offered to us, because we seem to be so cluttered that we just don't see very clearly. And that's really challenging, actually. It's a very uncomfortable way to operate as a human being. So this kind of clarity brings simplicity. It means we're exploring at the moment in my business the fact that we probably don't need to do 80% of what we do. So we're going through one of these processes at the moment that really only about 20% of it is valuable. And the rest is often kind of self-serving, makes me feel like a good person. My team, I sometimes think, want to please me, and I want to please some notional something. I'm not sure what it is quite that I'm pleasing, but we're all busy pleasing some notion of something we have to please. And honestly, it's like, let's actually get clear. There's only a few things that I'm good at and that I can really contribute here. So let me do that and let you do your bit. And it feels to me like we'd have a much more settled, peaceful, fulfilling world and experience of life that way.
Well, I definitely want to open this up to questions, but I also want to address again, this piece we've just come through COVID, where so many people were challenged financially, myself included. And I know people suffered greatly and continue to suffer. At the same time, the world went through a collective trauma. And if whatever your trauma was before was simply exacerbated after COVID, what did COVID do? It triggered all of our core issues. I'm alone, I'm not worthy, I'm isolated, all these kind of trauma situations.
And fear, a huge amount of fear, I think.
And then, of course, we saw the money grab, and we saw all of the things that happen when people feel fearful. And now, as I believe, and I know you believe, that miracles come out of chaos. And what you're proposing, especially in the face of crypto and all of that going on, what you're proposing is substantial and meaningful. And it is a paradigm shift, because it really is about, I just want enough food to give my neighbor when they're in trouble. And we see third world countries actually do this better, or I should say communities in third world countries, maybe not the governments. But we are in a tender place right now. Would you speak a little bit more about what you feel is the possibility for change and miracles in this whole relationship with money now? Why are we at this evolutionary time with money? Like, what's possible? And answer that in 3 sentences. No.
So if you look at the way that money appears to be implicated in pretty much everything that we would say is wrong with the world at the moment, I don't think it's really wrong. But if we just look through our normal lens, the level of corruption, which fundamentally comes down to power, and especially money, has been so exposed. I don't think it's new, but it's very exposed now. So money looks like it's the center of the problem in many ways. And I think our relationship with money is, can you imagine if we come up with all these solutions around climate and around social justice and all the issues that we need to resolve, and we continue with the same relationship with money? We're just going to get the same thing. So if we don't shift that relationship with money, we're not really going to shift the paradigm either. So what I feel is the opportunity of this, and perhaps the gift of COVID, given in a way that, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's happened now, so we can't undo what's in the past. But the gift of it is that really lies in the hands of the people who re-examine their life and say, I have to do this a different way. Whatever I was doing wasn't working. I don't think that's going to come from the people who are winning the game at the moment. It's going to come from the people who have lost the game and then realize that that wasn't a game worth playing, and therefore start to re-examine. And what I learned from money is that both miracles happen and there's a steady orientation towards building a good relationship that is very, very rewarding over time. And in the desperate stages of life where people really don't have their basics, the miracles of a neighbor who gives you something just when you need it, if you're open to it, and the fact that people can share resources, that's as real as something that might happen at a much more expanded business level, for example. So I think the main thing is that it doesn't really matter whether people are having to start at rock bottom again or are building something new. Like I started from rock bottom, but I just was a little bit ahead of that thing. It was the last recession, or now I'm building something much bigger. It doesn't really matter, but these fundamental principles enable us to do money in a way that, well, it's based on love and abundance and generosity and the principles of nature. Really important. I've been in many conversations recently with Indigenous people, and time again, what I hear is what I'm talking about aligns with their principles of reciprocity and just the original principles of Earth. So it's like the original principles meet a very modern expression of money in many ways, and then I feel that we have something that we can grow. And so every step we take of growing that, rather than growing the old hungry, desperate, worried, stressed, conflicted, confusing relationship with money, is a contribution to humanity and to all of us having a relationship with money that works, to use Bucky Fuller's words, that works for a world that works for 100% of humanity. And to use Charles Eisenstein's words, the world that our hearts know is possible. That's the orientation, and letting money make that world work. That's what it's designed for. That's the essence of money.
And I just know for myself that the more gratitude, love, joy, and wonder I have creates more grace, because grace is that feeling of transcendency, inner peace, all is well, all connectedness. I feel so much more abundant in terms of when I see something in my house that I don't need, it's like, let's find somebody to gift this to. Like, I don't have the same attention to accumulation, and I don't need stuff. And I know other people do, or they want that. So it's really a joy exchange now. And even if it's, the little that I do with my orphanage in Rwanda and my extended family there, and with our communities in Australia, the business plan always called for more money, but we managed to accomplish what we wanted because we were pure of heart, I hope, and we're just giving and receiving in community.
Yes.
And when I come into communities, I partner with people. It's not about I know anything more. And it's the same thing with money. It's that trust of I'm going to be here full-hearted, and we will show up with whatever money we have. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, somebody's donating food or somebody's doing this. And then you don't have to, I don't worry anymore.
And money is so beautiful because money really is just a kind of freedom that you can give somebody. But if that person needs the money to buy food, the food is just as good.
Exactly. Yes.
So it doesn't matter if what matters is if you get given food and you've already got masses of food, you don't want any more food, and then that food goes to waste. That's not a really good thing. Then it's easier to have money because it gives you the freedom to buy what you want. Money is just a way that we give freedom to each other. When people are at the level of needs, really basic needs, you're not even really talking about free. You're talking about the freedom to actually be alive and to sustain yourself. That's a very different thing. So yeah, it's important to see how all of that works. Like money in itself is nothing, but what it expresses is beautiful. And then people have the choice to do what they choose to do with it. We give them the freedom.
And then we also have to explore the freedom to receive, because when our judgments and our lack of forgiveness and our contractedness around, I don't even use the word money. I think of resources. Money is a form of resource. But it's like if I'm asking for it, but my sensory devices are not open to seeing that it's being offered.
Very important for humanitarians and non-profits. The number of people who've ended up bitter, really bitter and disappointed because they wanted to give, but they weren't willing to receive. And then they could never give as much as they wanted to. But the more generously you want to give, the more generously you need to be able to receive. And you need to receive for yourself, not only for others. Very, very important.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I want to make sure that people have a chance to ask their questions. And Suzanne Lerner has her hand already up.
That looks like a familiar name, isn't it? Haven't I met you somewhere, Suzanne?
Susan, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi. My question is, there's a lot of talk about being in the present moment, and then I'm hearing you talking about that you have to do the due diligence. And I witnessed growing up people burning out and giving too much. And so how do you find that balance where the process is as important as the end? Like, I have to learn all kinds of being on the internet and all sorts of stuff that is hard and confusing that I want to avoid. So how do you know that you're going through useful frustration as opposed to not living your life in order to get to a goal in the future?
It's a really, really interesting question. And in many ways, Suzanne, I think we don't know. We do experiments. It's good to keep the experiments small, especially at the beginning, so that if it turns out to be a bad experiment, you're not so invested in it that you burn out, for example, and then spend a few years having to recover. So do small experiments with your life, because in a way, what you're talking about is how do you do this good thing and have a life? So to me, it's all the same thing. Like, really, it should be all one thing. It would be great if we didn't have to ask that question, but we do because of the models that we're surrounded by, and that's the way it's done so often. So I think doing very small experiments and being really honest. So I've had to learn, for example, that I'm not a person who can manage thousands of relationships. People always want to introduce me to everybody who's going to want to know about what I'm doing. And I can't handle that many meetings and that many relationships. So I've had to make my life very simple, and very much I concentrate on just what I can do. I have a friend who's always trying to offer, you could do this business, you could do that business. It's like, no, I don't want to. I'll give that to somebody else, because I can't handle that. I've burnt out. I know what it takes. And to recognize that you have choice in your life and nobody else has. You are the only person who can make those choices, and you are the only person who can decide what feels good to you. And so we very often kind of put our responsibility on other people, like, oh, well, I'm supposed to do it like so-and-so because they're really successful, so I should be like them. But actually you can't, because you're not like them. So you have to find your own way. So I don't think there's a formula for that. It's your willingness to love yourself and love your own life at the heart of your work that produces a life that gets better and better, rather than just strips you of every bit of energy and love that you have, which is a real possibility.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Suzanne. As always, brilliant inquiry. And also to remember that we just have to look at our judgments, like when you talk about balance, it's about, how am I going about this task? Am I going into it feeling overwhelmed and judgmental about my abilities? And, I know you know all that. That I think is where the balance is, and finding the joy. And as Sarah says, pick one thing, to focus on and get success there, and see where that leads.
There is a word, which is a word that, it's an interesting word, but it becomes more and more powerful for me, which is the word pleasure. We are so naturally geared towards pleasure and away from pain. If you would imagine that your work, your contribution was based on your experience of pleasure and the sharing of pleasure with others. I've actually received that from money. It's not in the book, but somewhere else, that business is the sharing of pleasure. And I often think, so what would shopping be like if the shops saw that their business was about the sharing of pleasure? And what would any business activity or any humanitarian activity be if we realized that that's what it's about? And then it's like, what's pleasure for me? What does it mean for me to feel good, rather than for me to feel worthy or to feel virtuous or to feel like I'm doing the right thing or that I'm somehow vindicating some awful whatever history? Like, we get into these very weird relationships with ourselves, or we don't realize we're trying to justify something from years ago. But if I actually allow myself to feel good and to put that at the center of what I'm doing, because then I will naturally do more of it and I will naturally do it better. The more we deny that for ourselves, and the more we do the delayed gratification thing, the more everything goes on hurting. That's what I discovered. So you started, Suzanne, by talking about being in the present. The power of the present is that it's the creative moment. It's the moment that shapes the future. If we shape the present moment with judgment or tolerance or just getting it done, that's the kind of future we're creating. If we experience the present moment with a rich enjoyment and an expansive generosity, that's the kind of future that we are shaping. And you can see immediately, you can feel the energy of the difference between those two.
Beautiful.
Thank you both.
Anyone else have a burning question? You don't even have to raise your hand. You could type it in the chat.
You're
Yes,
recording, right? Well, you're recording this, right? Because what Sarah just said, I couldn't, I had to close my eyes and picture it, and picture the people I know who now have a child who's so challenged, and they take him with him. He has Angelman syndrome. He has no language, and they took him on vacation, and he takes his food in the shower rather than going in the pool, because he just wants to be he likes big shower. I mean, I watched them doing business, and this woman does business with pleasure. And all the things that you just said, it's like, oh, could we just, I need to have this recording so I can write down every word and feel it. Like I walked my dog today and I'm looking at this beautiful harbor and saying, okay, now you're walking here and this is part of the grace. Like I take the grace process with me, and you're not walking your dog alone in grief. You're walking her alone this time in joy. And but then there's always that fear that I'm not doing it right. And am I open to receive? And am I closing? I put my hand, oh my God, I am overwhelmed. I'll stop talking, but I just hope that we get the recording. I am very grateful for all of this. I'm not sure I have a question. I'm in overwhelm of wonder.
And Pat, I just want you to take a breath, because you have been living this discovery about money and safety for 8 years now. And we don't have to go into it right now, but I just want you to sit into the beauty of what you know to be true right now, which is you've always been fine, you're going to be fine, you have the resources you need. And well, that's where the work is right now. That the work is simply being appreciative of all of that. And Sarah, Pat's been on a long journey, and she's maybe moving soon, which has been anticipated for a long time. And yet it's unfolding the way it needs to. And I don't know if you want to comment, Sarah.
Just that it's very beautiful to see that openness. And I really want to say, let's let the word overwhelm disappear out of this for a moment. There's an experience of energy that's happening, something that perhaps opens your heart, opens your eyes to see things more clearly. And that's being activated within you. So that will become more and more your reality. When we first open to something, it's just like, oh, wow, never realized that, never saw that. But over time, you nurture that energy, not by working at it, by relaxing, by enjoying, by simple, appreciation, gratitude, things that Laurie's talked about. That's how you nurture that energy. And then you'll see over a few months, like, oh, that's beginning to become real for me. I'm beginning to live like that, not how I was before. So you don't need to be overwhelmed because there isn't a whole lot to do.
I think it's almost like superwhelmed.
Yes, I think that's a better word.
Superwhelmed. And it's interesting the things that I'm letting go of. Like I'm in this house for another year that I know of. And I'm open to the possibilities of creating my own abundance so that I can be someplace safe that I enjoy. My dog is here, and what I'm wondering is that, like, the changes that are happening here, when I let them go with grace, like I said, they could cut some climbing hydrangea on part of the house. Well, the man cut the root. So I know that what's on the back of the house is going to die now. And I thought, okay, this is another letting go of something that you created that was beautiful. And maybe the miracle will be it'll get enough water from its leaves to live. But it's like letting go. So letting go of, every time you let go, it creates more space, correct?
Yes. Yes. Like the other thing is sometimes things like that happen, and it is what's happened. And sometimes, we can go into a terrible blame thing because clearly he shouldn't have done it, but he has done it. And whether he should or he shouldn't have, he has. And so a lot of the space is by you simply recognizing this is what's happened. Maybe next time whatever, you can do something differently, but that's a very minor thing. You'll register that. But the spaciousness of not going around it over and over again, but recognizing this is what's happened. We can see the space physically because suddenly there's going to be room for something else to grow there, literally, if you choose, or if you don't choose, something's going to grow there anyway. So it's very simple in a way. And I think a lot of the issue is we make these big dramas in our mind, but actually whether it should have happened or not, it's happened. And there is space. And by accepting that, you create space within your own heart and within your own mind. And you get to choose what you put into that space, both on the wall of the house and in the space of your heart and your mind. What do you get to put in it? And that's a really beautiful gift. You can choose to have peace and quiet in there. You can choose to imagine what you might grow there next. You can choose to give all that attention to something completely different that's important for you. It is literally, there's a freedom in it as well, and a simplicity.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think there's a lot to consider, and a lot to grow into. And
I'd like
yes.
to ask something.
Yes, Marcia. Good to see you.
Hi. Hi, good to see you. Yeah. And thank you, Sarah. It's about the pain of looking at the world and having, and then seeing those that have not. And what that balance is, I'm really, really working with that in myself. And it like takes the joy away from having and even sharing, because then there's always more that's needed. And it's that place in my own being and in the world that I'm really looking at in terms of what is abundance and how are we sharing that with one another, and where is it beneficial? You know, it's like in programs and in humanitarian aid, but then there's also like in interpersonal relationships where, you know, I'm with someone who has the whole family, the whole extended family has much less than what I have, and like how does the giving really be of benefit and of balance?
Yeah, it's actually a very deep question. That it goes to the roots of what it is to be a human being, and probably we all wrestle with it at some point in our lives from some perspective, because there is so much disparity. And I think we know inside ourselves that everybody having an equal amount of money doesn't make any sense. It's like that would just, or it doesn't even make sense. It's like it's a nonsensical thought. So how do you reconcile? All I can do is share a few things that I have found helpful, which might not be the answer for you, but it might give some pointers. One of the things that has become really apparent to me, and this does not justify any abuse of any other human being, but it has become apparent to me that there is a great diversity of there's a great diversity of human beings with a great diversity of wishes for life, for the way they express life, the way they live. And to deny that is actually to deny something really fundamental. I see that there are people who know that they are born to do something very big. Maybe they contribute at the business level. They create wealth for an enormous number of people. We can call it destiny, we can call it something, but they know that. They know and that they're selling stuff by the time they're 5 or 6 on the parents' driveway. They're born for it, and they make an enormous contribution, because people who create wealth create the wealth that we all enjoy. So that's the first thing, is that anyone who creates wealth, that's where the economy gets to circulate. There's a huge contribution in there. And we can look at people who create enormous wealth. We're very prone to criticize them. And yes, there are some, there are some extremely abusive things that are done with wealth, but we still need to understand that all that money is still working. That money is not sitting in somebody's bank account piling up. The wealthier somebody is, the more their money works. And it gets invested in things. And yes, it may be invested in arms that are going to kill people, but most of that money is still going to the people. Well, all the money goes to the people who contribute. So I personally find it very hard to support the arms industry. It's not a discussion about that, but I recognize that the money goes to pay people to produce the metal and to produce the this and to produce the that. So it's all of that money, even in a very destructive industry, is paying people to live. So that's important to realize, that the circulation of money and the creation of wealth is a really significant contribution to the economy. It's the only contribution to the economy, really. I think it's really important to realize that at a soul level, there really do seem to be choices that we make. And, for me to ask why are we born at this time in this place? Why are we experiencing what we're experiencing? Why is that person experiencing what they're experiencing, which may be, to you, great suffering? I learned a lot from a neighbor who had her daughter had, I can't remember the name of it, but it was an illness or a condition that meant that from the age of about 11, she deteriorated. She grew up fairly normal and then started to deteriorate. And she was in a wheelchair. She was about 27. She was in a wheelchair. She had no speech. She had very little motor control. And my husband and I, especially my husband, looked after her every day for 2 hours or so for 2 years. And what we learned from her was that literally that was her life choice. She chose to be in that situation because she wanted to learn how to give with love. And so she restricted everything she had except the capacity for love. It was an extraordinary choice, and she was an extraordinary soul, a very, very developed soul. She was in a previous life, she'd been a kind of Florence Nightingale type. So she was a deeply humanitarian soul who chose to have a very specific experience that we would think, oh my God, that's terrible, that's something wrong, but it wasn't. And she just showered love everywhere, absolutely everywhere. So that helped me to, I've had to understand that people make choices. Those choices never justify somebody else abusing power and making decisions that are destructive to other human beings or to nature. And so therefore, a company that pays women and children to make shoes at a level that they can barely live on and keeps them in a kind of paid slavery, so to speak, what they're doing, it doesn't justify that. But the money is still paying for food and for the children and for things to do that. So it's not the money. That's the human beings who make those decisions. When I make those kinds of distinctions, and then the one other distinction that's been really important for me, and it's such a silly thing, but we often don't think like this. If I have $100 in my hand now, okay, so that's worth $100 to me. Actually, it's not worth anything to me until I do something with it. If I pass that on to you and you give me $100 worth of service, whatever it is, a product or a service, you now have $100 worth of freedom, of spending power. I've got $100 worth of something in my, so I've got $100 and you've got $100. If you pass that $100 on to somebody else and they give you something, you now have $100 worth, I have $100 worth, and they have $100 worth. So that $100 is now worth $300. This is called velocity in technical terms. But it's really important to see it in kind of just pictorial terms. So the more we exchange money for service and products, especially, and create economies, the more everybody gets to share in that wealth. And when we realize that, we realize the power of money. Money is not a fixed amount that, if you have more, somebody else has less. Actually, the more you do with your money, the more money is created everywhere. And so the more money you have access to, the more you're able to contribute. And then it's up to you how you choose to do that. Do you do that? What values do you bring to what you do with the money? And some people bring values which are very much about, that they're willing to hurt people for the sake of their shareholders. And some people bring values where they don't hurt people. They really try hard not to hurt people and to do things that are beautiful and good and beneficial. And that's up to the person and their values. So never, ever be ashamed of having more. Just ask yourself, what am I going to do with it? And it's not necessarily to give it all away, but it's like, what can I do with it that is really valuable for me and for other people? When you start to look at valuable, you start to look at values, you start to look at the real essence of money, which is all about value.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. And this we could start a year-long program. But I think we've touched on so many of the important pieces. And I'm going to sound like a commercial. I've never done this before, but you really need to.
It's funny, when you hold the book up, the title actually goes all fuzzy in the picture. Love money, money loves you, just so that you know. Yeah, hold it still.
Thank you. Well, look at the people on the call, have it.
They've already got there. Thank you.
It's the mute, it's the background thing. But I just want to say how I also appreciate deeply this quest that people who were born into money or received money have this sometimes have a block of guilt, a block of undeservability, a core issue of that really needs a lot of work. That's how deep I want to invite each of you to go into your relationship with money. Because there's so much more than you know. There's so much more. Dealing with your relationship with money will also heal your core issues with all kinds of other things.
It's really strange, that, isn't it? So unexpected, but it just, I had no idea that figuring out my relationship with money would actually give me access to joy in a way that I'd not experienced it before. We look for joy in money, and actually we find it if we do it the right way. We don't find it if we do it the old-fashioned way. So yeah, it's an extraordinary thing somehow. It's so central in our lives. It's so much more than we've taken it to be. I think we've just massively misunderstood it.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for all of your time and your deep answers and your own deeply committed work and your courage to be out there bringing this message, which, when you're a visionary, when you're a paradigm shifter, that's a whole journey in itself. I'm gonna obviously send the recording out. Please share the recording with anyone that you'd like to. It's an important, this is not about money. It's about loving ourselves. Can I say that, Sarah?
You can. Many people say to me, oh, Sarah, I've realized that the more I love myself, the more everything works.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you to each of you for being on the call, for the people who will listen.
Can I ask? I know at the book celebration earlier, a couple of days ago, Sarah, you said that you were going to be doing a class in May of going through the book and some of the activities in the book together?
Yes, the book club, the great big book club. Do you want me to just give you the link?
Yeah, sure.
I'll
That
pop
would
it.
be great.
It's sarahmccrum.com/book-club. That's it. Oh, it's
Beautiful.
put a gap in my name. It should be all one.
Yeah,
Obviously, you should
no
put a
space.
gap.
And
Yeah.
Sarah, I will include that in my newsletter
Oh,
also.
thank you, Laurie.
Make sure I'm going to write that down myself. Well, thank each
you.
of you for this rich discussion, and it's just a beginning, I feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there's so much to explore here, and you've done so much of it yourself already, Laurie. So you can share that.
Well, we'll have many more discussions. I hope.
Welcome. Yes, I'm happy anytime. It's really nice. It's beautiful to have a conversation with this level of depth, and to feel no barriers around that. Just to be able to speak so openly, it's really noticeable.
I'm so glad. All right. Happy Miracle Friday and Miracle Saturday to Sarah.
Yes.
And you'll be reading us soon, and you can listen to the recording shortly. So thank you
very much,
I'll
Laurie.
give you all my Zoom hug.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well.
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.